This isn't just dirt, it's one of the most critical resources for your plants. It's the soil. And soil does so many things for your plants. Firstly, it provides moisture, it provides nutrients, and it provides stability for the root system to develop. So you get strong plants that produce flowers, that produce leaves, that produce fruit and vegetables and can grow into huge, great trees. Roughly, there's 4 different types of soils that we talk about. We talk about clay soils, sandy soils, silty soils and loamy soils. And loam really is a combination of the previous 3. It is thought to be the most desirable. Now, there's different pros and cons depending on what type of soil you have. Clay soils, for example, can be very wet and sticky and difficult to cultivate in the wintertime, but can become rock hard and dry out very well in the summertime. But because they drain quite poorly, they tend to hold the nutrients. They don't get washed through. Now, sandy and silty soils, for example, well, you can cultivate them all the way through the year because they drain very well and they don't become sticky and claggy and heavy. They're quite easy to cultivate. But on the other side, the nutrients get washed through. So those soils can become very poor because all the nutrients get leached out. So how do you know what type of soil you've got? Well, for example, to test for clay soil, if you've got a clay soil and you squeeze a ball of clay soil together, it will stick together like a solid lump, like plasticine, and it won't break up, it won't fall apart. But if, for example, you've got a silty soil or a sandy soil, similar to what I've got here, if you squeeze it into a ball like I've got now, but then you just gently do that, it just falls apart, it breaks up nice and easily. So that's more of an indication that you've got more of a silty or sandy soil because it doesn't stay in that ball like modelling clay. Now, you might be thinking, oh, goodness me, though, I've got that really heavy clay soil, or I've got that really, incredibly well-drained sandy soil and I'm losing all the nutrients. What can I do to kind of improve these? And it's weird, really, because the solution is pretty similar for all types of soils. It's the addition of organic material. And by organic material, I mean things like compost, for example. I've got some spent garden compost here. It could be compost you bought from a garden centre. It could be leaf mould. It could be mushroom compost. It could be well-rotted manure. Anything organic like that you can dig into the soil will improve the soil. What it'll do in clay soils is it'll open up the clay soil a little bit and create air pockets so the water can drain through a little bit more easily. But in sandy soils, it'll add body to the soil, and that means it will hold on to the nutrients so they don't get washed through quite so quickly. So your clay soil becomes more amenable, becomes more easy to use because it's got the air pockets and it breaks up. And your sandy soil becomes more fertile because the addition of that organic material is holding on to the nutrients. So yeah, there's really easy ways to improve the soil type you've got. So now you know the soil type you've got, roughly, you can then look for other things such as soil pH and what we call NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. So what is soil pH and why do I need to know? Well, firstly, pH stands for potential hydrogen. And pH goes from acid to neutral to alkaline. And it's important to know what type of soil you've got because different plants thrive in different pH levels. For example, azaleas, camellias, those sorts of plants like an acid soil. Things like lavender, things like clematis, pinks and lilacs like an alkaline soil. So if you know what type of soil you've got, you can grow the right plants for the right soil in your garden. But it's really important when you test the soil in your garden to test different areas of your garden because even in a small garden, the pH can vary. If you've got a new build house, for example, near the house itself, where they've used lots of mortar and things like that, the soil could be quite alkaline, but further away from the house, it could be more neutral to acid. So it's important to test 2 or 3 different areas, if not more, in the garden, and to take the soil samples from about 4 or 5 inches down. And you can buy kits to actually do this. They're great fun to use, really simple, and they give you great results. And I've got one here, for example, a little pH testing kit. And it's so simple to use. You just mix up some soil with some pure water and leave that for about 30 minutes or so to separate out. And then with a little pipette, you take some of the clear water from the top and you just drip that onto some of these little pH testing strips here. And I've done this earlier on with the soil I've got here. And then just by picking that up, you can see there's a colour change on that strip. And if you just then test that against the side and move along till the colours match, that will actually give you an idea of the pH you've got. For my one, I would say roughly I'm coming out somewhere between 7.25 and 7.5, so kind of roughly roundabouts neutral. And that's quite good in a way, actually, because neutral soils, you can probably grow more things than if it's very alkaline or very acidic. So there you go. It's very, very important to know the soil pH, because if you want to grow rhododendrons and azaleas, for example, in your garden, and you don't want to grow them in pots using ericaceous compost, well, if you know you've got acid soil, you can put those plants in that area and they will grow very, very well. If you want to grow lavender and things like that, and you've got very alkaline soil, you know they're going to thrive. And the main reason as well that plants won't survive in the wrong soil is that in certain soil pHs, nutrients are locked up in the soil and very, very difficult for the plants to absorb. So, that's why it's really critical to know the right plant for the right pH. And that way, you're going to get the right results from the beginning. You're not going to waste money on the wrong plants for the wrong position. And you're going to have a garden that looks great and plants that thrive. We were talking just now about pH testing kits, but you can actually buy little meters like this. They'll not only test for pH, they test for moisture and light levels as well. And all you do is simply push the prongs into the ground and just move the little dial over to the pH reading, and it very quickly gives you the pH. It'll also give you an indication of the moisture level in the soil as well. That's important for plants that like lots of moisture or not so much moisture. And also it'll give you a light level reading as well. And again, that's important because some plants like lots and lots of light, others like a shadier position. So if you want a very simple piece of kit that's going to give you those three readings very, very quickly, this is something to go for. Besides knowing the pH of your soil, it's also important to know the NPK levels in your soil, and that stands for nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And these are the three main elements that plants need. Nitrogen, for example, is what they use in lawn feeds. It gives you those really, really super green lawns that we all absolutely love. And then we've got phosphorus. Now, phosphorus is great for root production. And again, sometimes autumn lawn feeds are high in phosphorus to give the lawn really strong roots through the winter time. And then we've got potassium, and potassium is very, very important for flower production and therefore fruit and vegetable production. So knowing the NPK levels in your soil means you know just what sort of plants you can grow or what deficiencies you might have. And again, you can get great little testing kits like this, where you can very, very simply just mix up some of your soil with a reagent like this and give it a shake, and that gives you a colour reaction. This one is for nitrogen. And just by comparing that on the little chart you have here, that will give you an indication of how much nitrogen you've got in your soil or how little nitrogen you've got in your soil. And you can do that for the phosphorus and potassium as well. So then you know exactly how much nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium you have in your soil. And if there is a deficiency, then you can correct that very, very easily just by using different fertilizers. You can use a solid granular type of fertilizer, like this one, for example. We've got some sulfate of iron here, or you can use a liquid feed as well, like the one we've got here. Both will do the job in the long run. Liquid feeds tend to act a little bit more quickly because they get absorbed by the plant straight away. The granular feeds need to be watered in and need to be broken down before the roots can absorb them. But knowledge is power, isn't it? So once you know the NPK levels in your soil, then you can correct that and get the best results. So in a nutshell, you know what type of soil you've got now, you know what type of pH you've got now, you know what sort of NPK you've got. So now you're just free to go wild in the garden centres, buy the plants that you know are going to be brilliant for your soils, and just get those fantastic results in your garden you've always wanted.